Hey guys, and welcome to another Unity tutorial, and in this one I'm going to cover saving your game in JSON, this time and not XML, simply for the reason that I think JSON is a lot more modern and it's starting to become this norm. So Unity has this really simple method for storing JSON using the JSON utility class. It's basically to JSON or from JSON, and that's about all you need to do. So I'm going to start by explaining what is going to be going on in this tutorial. And so I first want to cover how our components and non-component classes are going to work together. So in this example, we're going to be using components to communicate with sort of how the game works. So where do I put game objects? Where do game objects go? And classes are going to act as more of data, which they are data structures, and they're going to be storing all the information that the outer program that isn't exactly the game needs to know, so that it can in turn store all that data in JSON, and then the game can then contact it and say, hey, I need to load all this JSON up again so that I can, in our case, put the characters where their saved locations were. Okay, so to cover what sort of components that we're going to have and what classes we're going to have, we'll start with saying we're going to have this actor component, which is going to communicate with the game and share the actor data with it. So it's going to have an actor data attribute, and our actor data class is going to have a structure of health, position, and maybe some other details. And so this actor data is going to be shared with our saving and loading system, and it's going to sort of act like a middleman between the game and program, like we were talking about earlier with components versus classes. So we can get started right there, and I'm going to start by creating an actor component. So pick C# script as a new thing to create, and I'll type in actor here. Okay, now I'm going to open this up, but I'm not going to start with actually creating anything in the actor class itself. What I'm going to start with is working on our actor data class, since it's more of an abstraction and doesn't really have any dependencies on other classes. So the actor data class is going to be this class that's just going to store three things. We're going to have a string, which is a name. We're going to have a vector3 representing the position. And we're going to have a float representing health of the character. Okay, and now we want to add this tag up to the top here called serializable. Now this won't pop up in IntelliSense immediately. You'll need to actually right-click on it or hit Control period and write using system. If you're not using an IDE, then you can just include system by writing using system up there, and it'll figure it out. So we put the serializable tag so that Unity is able to store this in JSON ultimately. So I guess I'll show you what that means in a second. So right now I'm going to start filling in whatever data we need in the actor class, and one of those examples is that we need an actor data attribute, new actor data, and we're just going to make it a new actor data off the start, as we'll store things in it as the game happens. So when we save, our actor data is going to be filled in RAM, and then we eventually write it to a file. Okay, so we'll make an example string of a name here. We'll call this guy actor, and that'll save his name. Oops, I'll put string name equals actor. Okay, and we want a quick example of health. We'll be manually editing that. Okay, and so now I'll add in whatever functions that we can use right now. We don't really need any of those mono behavior functions. Okay, so our first one is going to be storing data. So this is going to be what happens when we store data inside of our actor data attribute. So we'll do a public void store data, and we're going to first store a name, and you can probably guess what comes next, considering we want to store everything that is relevant. So data.position equals transform.position, and data.health equals health. Okay. Now we want one that's very similar, which is going to load the data, which pretty much does the opposite. So here's some grunt work for you. Name equals data.name. We basically just want to reverse these. Oops. So this would be pose dot, actually data.pose, sorry about that, is going to become our new position. And we want our health to be our data's health. And if this doesn't really make sense now, or it seems kind of redundant, sorry, let me rename this. Let me just say this is going to store inside of here, and then whenever we load, it's going to pull whatever is from there. So the idea is once we overwrite these saves, load data will figure it out later, which is the concept of saving and loading in general. So we're going to put in an onEnable function and an onDisable function, but we're not going to fill anything in these quite yet, as we have another class which is going to have these events, and once these events fire, the actor will know, hey, I need to save, or hey, I need to load. So we'll get back to the actor class in a bit, but very quickly I want to make another new script, and this one's going to be an actor container, and this is another representation of JSON. Think of this as a representation of our actors' attributes in JSON. So we're going to go and make another script in Unity, and this one's going to be called actor container. Actor container. And we can go ahead and open this one up. Okay, now this is another example of one that's not going to be a mono behavior, similar to our actor data class. And that's because it's, again, a JSON representation. So let's pull out these start and load functions, and we're going to create another serializable class. So I will use system again, and I'm also going to need to use system.collections.generic, because we're going to be using a list, and this is going to be a list of actors. So a list actor data. Sorry, I didn't want to have a discrepancy there, but it's going to be a list of actor data that's going to be representing our actors in the file. So we can just quickly initialize it, and that's all that we need to do here, because we can just now access that whenever we want to make a new actor data. So that's, or actually an actor container, sorry. So when we load using this JSON utility, it'll figure out what we're supposed to be doing when that happens. So what we're supposed to be doing is making a new actor container so we can grab all these actors from it. So now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and make our save data class, which is going to be probably our most code intensive. And that's because it's kind of all the logic that's going on when we save and load. So I'm going to go back into Unity and create another new script. And this one is going to be called save data, as I just mentioned. So save data. Okay, reload. All right, so again, this is not a mono behavior, and it does not need mono behavior functions. All right, so first I'm going to specify an actor container, because this is going to represent the actor container of the entire game. So every actor is supposed to be stored in this actor container when we load the game. So we will again initialize it just so that we can use it whenever we want to. And the reason why this is static is so that we can just have one actor container and just access it from our save data class, so that we don't need to make a new save data class every time we want an actor container, because we want this to be easily accessible. There are other ways to get around this, but for this example, I'm just going to be using a static variable. Okay, so I'm going to want to specify a delegate type here, and if you don't know anything about delegates, don't freak out, it's not a big deal. All you need to know is that we're going to be using this as a type for our events. We're going to have an onLoad event and an onBeforeSave event. So let's write these out right now. So public static event serialize action, which is the type of event, onLoaded. And we want to have another event with the same type onBeforeSave. So this happens after loading, onLoaded, and onBeforeSave happens right before saving, of course. And the idea behind these events is that they're going to be storing a lot of our actors' data. And we can actually hop over to our actor class right now, because this is where we're going to be using these events, just so that we don't have to jump back to it later. So the first thing we want to do is save data dot onLoaded plus equals load data. So this means once this event is fired, this is one of the actions that's going to happen once this is fired. So we call onLoaded somewhere in the save data later on, but for now we will just fill it up with things. Okay, so save data dot onBeforeSave is going to also add on stored data, and one more thing, which is apply data. And we want to obviously do apply data right after store data because we're going to store the data and then apply it to the actor. So, oh, and speaking of which, actually, yeah, we're going to write this function later, so I'll just leave it commented out really quickly. And the other thing I want to do is we need to onDisable, remove these from the events, because you typically want to have somewhere where you, in an event, add stuff into it, as in functions or whatever, and then you want to remove them at some point in your program. And onEnable and onDisable are two very good places you can put them, just because they happen, when the game object enters the game, it'll do this. Once the game object leaves the game, it'll remove them. And you don't want to leave them hanging. I won't go far into why you don't want to leave them in there, because it's a bit beyond the scope of the video. But just understand that you want to have these removed at some point. Okay, so let's go back to... Actually, I need to write this quick function, apply data, and this will eventually add the actor's data to a list in the save data, but for now we don't have that function, so let's go back over to our save data and get back to what we were actually doing. So why don't we first write our load function. So I'll write public static void load, and this will take a path of where we want to load. So first I will edit the actor container here, and this is going to use load actors path. Now the concept behind load actors is that it is actually the part that's going to load everything from JSON. And so I'll write these functions quickly, actually. So here, let's write our static load actors function. So private static actor container load actors. And this, again, takes a string path because it needs to know where that JSON file is. So first, we want to say string JSON equals file.read all text from that path. I believe I need to include some sort. Yeah, so we want to use system.io up here. Make sure you write that in. And I'm going to just return JSON utility. JSON utility dot from JSON, and we want to give it the type of actor containers that it knows what it's trying to parse the JSON into, and we want to pass it our string of JSON. So basically what's happening here is we're loading all the text out of a file into a string. And we're going to assume that this string is JSON, and then we want to then parse that JSON into an actor container type. And then we're going to return it so that this function can then store it here. So if we uncomment this, then the idea is our actor container is now going to be filled with whatever was in that JSON folder, file, sorry. And now actually, just with only that code, our loading functionality does work. And that's why I like the JSON utility class, because it makes this sort of thing much easier. Okay, so now I'm going to write our save actors function. So we'll write private static void save actors. Again, we want a path of where to save it, and we want a container of actors that we want to shove in this JSON file. So first we're going to make another string, and this is going to be using JSON utility again, but this time we're going to be changing a container of actors to JSON, so actors. So this is obviously going to be this actor container up here, which is going to be filled with a bunch of actors by the time we save it here. Excuse me. Okay, so I'll write a stream writer really quick. SW equals file dot create text in the path, and basically this function is going to, if the file doesn't exist, it will make the file and fill it with everything. If the file does exist, it will override it and just put whatever was in this string there. So now I want to do sw.close. Sorry, I was actually incorrect. The purpose of this is it's going to create that file, and if it already exists, then it will override it. However, it's not going to fill it with our JSON, because this is just the part that will create the file. Now what we want to do is write all the text with write all text at that path and using our JSON string. Okay, so these two functions are done, and we have a couple of other helper functions that we want to add in. So our first one is that add actor data function that we saw before, which is a little redundant. It's going to add the actor data to the actor container. So actor container dot actors dot add data. Okay, and let's do this similar thing with clear actor data. Well, actually, this is going to be clear actor list. It doesn't need to take anything, because all it's going to do is access this actors attribute, and we're just going to clear it, basically. Okay, and the purpose of this is so that we don't have duplicate data, because whenever we want to save in here, we need to clear, is the idea. So before we save, we want to clear. So let's see. Or not before we save, sorry. After we save, and after we load, we want to clear. So let me go ahead and write in a couple of... Actually, I'm going to write the save function. This should be the last one that we have. Public static void save. And this is going to take a string path and actor container of actors, of course. And the first thing we're going to do is call our onBeforeSave event. So every time this function is called, we throw off everything that was stored in onBeforeSave. We also want to do save actors, and we're going to use the path and the actors in this argument list, parameter list, sorry. And then we want to clear, of course. So clear actor list. So again, we want to do everything that's onBeforeSave, which is going to be in our actor class. And we want to store all of our actors as JSON inside of the file. Then we're going to clear this actor container, just so that we don't have any duplicate data, so that the next time we save, we don't have any sort of mess in there. Okay, now that that's through, we can move on. We actually have more stuff to write in our load function, but we're going to go to our game controller really quick and put in some code in there so that we can finish up this load function. Actually, right before we do that, I believe I can just uncomment all of these so that we ensure that we actually add the actor data once we, right before we save. So that's what's going to be filling up the actor container. So I'll go back here and again to Unity, where we're going to create a game controller class. Okay, so game controller. Okay, and this is going to be a mono behavior. This is going to be a big one in basically telling Unity what it's even supposed to be doing. It's a good example of how a component is considered the communicator with Unity. Okay, so we got a couple of things in here. These will be used later. Save button. Button. And we have another button, which is going to be used to load. And we're going to have to write using unity.ui, unityengine.ui. Okay, and these are just going to be the buttons that will trigger either saving or loading. Okay, so let's see. We want to have a player prefab so that we can create it. Player prefab. Oops. Okay. And we also want to have a path of where we want the data to be stored. So that's going to be our persistent data path, but we need to initialize it with just an empty string. So I'll write string.empty. And now we're going to write a quick awake function. So void awake. Okay. And in our awake function, we want to set our data path to be system.io.path.combine, and that function's it basically is just a path combiner. It'll combine the strings that we put inside of it with a backslash, basically. So here we'll write application.persistent data path, which is a Unity attribute. Basically, it's a data path you can use across all your platforms. So it makes it really easy to store data somewhere, and it's a good place for save data especially. Okay, so then we have actors.json, and this is going to be the name of the file that all the actors are going to be saved into. And yeah, so we can move on from there. I don't believe we need an update function. We might use start. We will not use it now, that's for sure. So I want to first have a create actor function. So actor create actor. Okay, so the idea here is that we want to spawn in a prefab that's using our actor component. So quaternion rotation, and this is supposed to be position. Okay, and we want to have a we actually have a prefab already. So game object equals instantiate prefab at the position with that rotation. And we want to do this as a game object. Okay, and so actor equals game object dot get component actor. Now, if we don't have an actor component, we want to add an actor component. Okay. And if you're new to this operator, this should be player prefab, sorry. If you're new to this operator, that just means if this first one is null, then return the second one. So that means if it has no actor components, then we're going to go in here and create an actor component and then return it. And so that's what this add component function is going to do. It's going to return one that it adds newly. So then we just want to return that actor. Okay. Now, Oh. Okay, yeah, we should. Alright, I will add in a game object prefab. Okay. And then we'll just put prefab in here. Okay, because that's a static function. Alright, so first we want to have a save function. So void save. Actually, this would be a public save function. And in here we'll write save data dot save data path. And also we want to be using the actor container that save data is storing all the actors in. Okay? Now we want to use another function called load. Okay. And this is going to be doing save data dot load data path. Okay. So now we can just easily drag these two functions to our buttons and run these save functions. Okay, so we're in Unity, and we can actually add a game controller component to an empty game controller object. And I have these two UI buttons here, so let me pick these. So under save, we want our save button stored, and load, we want a load button. Oh, and I actually just realized we don't really need those to be stored in the game controller. What we can do instead is go to save button, just click on our UI element, and it should have a button component. And on this button component, we can just add a functionality to onClick, and we'll pick our game controller object into our game controller model behavior and click on save. And we'll go ahead and do the same for load. So, pick the game controller with the function of load. Okay. Now we have a player here with a player controller that's pre-made, that should be included. So we'll add on an actor script here, and we'll call this guy Joseph or something, and he'll have like 50 health. Oh, okay, I see. And so if I just run this, so we have our player here, and say we want to move around, so I move him over here and see the positions, and I will hit save. Okay, so now save should store this in a file with only one player inside of a JSON structure. But before we go and look at that, I want to point out that in our project settings, this is where we determine what the names of the folders that JSON will be stored in is. So on Windows, you're going to be going into your username, so C drive users username, and then your app data local low, and then this company name here, and the name of the product, which is the game name. And so we have our actors.json file. So theoretically, this actors.json file should now only have Joseph in it. And there we go, see? We have an actor container, which is represented by these parentheses here, or sorry, brackets. And actors is a key, which points to a JSON array, which contains only one object. Okay, so now we can see that he's in a position 14 on X, 1.5 on Y, and 5, and his health is the same as we said, and of course his name as well. So now let's go back into Unity and see what happens when we actually load this. Okay, now before we load, I want to point out that our load function is... Oh, actually, I believe our load function may be incomplete. So let's go to load, save data load. Okay, so sorry about this. We want to go ahead and finish our load function really quickly, and then we can see how this works. Okay, so we want to do a for each here. So for each actor data in actor container that actors. So we're going to cycle through every actor that we have stored in our actor container. we want to do game controller dot create actor using our data and our game controller dot player path, which is going to be basically where our player prefab is stored. We could also, why don't we just go ahead and make a player path, which is going to be player path. In my Unity project, it's in prefab/player. Well, actually, it's in resources, so let me show you really quick. It'll be in resources, prefabs, and then player. In save data, we're going to use that player path, and as well as that player path, we want to use data.position and quaternion.identity. So because we didn't actually serialize any sort of rotation, it's just going to be that. Okay. So, great. So in our game controller, we have a string path and a game object prefab. Oh, okay. I see. Let's write another helper function in our game controller. It's going to be another create actor, but this time it'll use data. So actor, create actor. And the idea behind this one is that it will actually use our actor data. So we'll use actor data, we'll have a string referring to our path, a position, and a rotation. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so our actor is going to equal our other create actor function using our path, our position, and our rotation. And now we just want to store that data in our actor and return that actor. Okay. Takes three. Oh yeah, so we want our prefab. We use, what is it? Player prefab, yeah. So player prefab. Okay. Alright, so now. Oh, I see. Okay. I made a little mistake here. Oh, okay, yeah, so our mistake was just we don't need to actually use this prefab. We'll just do game object prefab equals resources dot load game object at that path, and then we'll just load the prefab from a string rather than using our function over here. Okay, so now that that create actor function is done, which is basically going to create an actor using this function and then store its data, we can go back in save data, excuse me, and go ahead and finish this one up. Okay, so save data. After we do create all of these actors, we can pretty much just call on loaded. That way every actor knows what to do after the game is loaded. And then again, we want to clear that actor list so that it's not, so it doesn't have any duplicate data in it. Okay, so let's go back into Unity and, and what I'll do is deactivate this player. And once I hit the load button, it'll load the player that we originally saved. And we'll see, like, this guy should be named Joseph. He has 50 health, and it looks like his position is the same. And that's perfect. So now what we can do is clone, we'll have some fun and make a couple more of Joseph. We'll call this guy Bob, and we'll call this guy, I don't know, Ron. Okay, and Oh, I'm writing in the data. That's not what I want to do. Okay, so this guy will be Ron. He'll have 4 health. And this guy will be Bob, and he will have 10 health. Okay, so now I'm going to hit this save button. I'll drag these guys over a bit, actually. Looks like I have a physics problem here. Okay, whatever, that'll make it easier. Okay, so we'll hit save here. And let's actually check out our JSON file. So yeah, looks like we have Ron. And one of these guys went way up on the y-axis here, so we have an 88. Okay, so I'll minimize this and I'll hit play. And once I load, they should be back where they were. And it looks like they were. And here's Bob in space. Okay, so that's going to be it for this one. I'd say big takeaways were just obviously serialization, the concept of components versus classes, and we had some delegate and event work in there. So if this didn't really make that much sense, maybe if you go through it again it will. Otherwise, I'd say why not try going with some simpler examples, or maybe something more, I guess, focused on those specific concepts. So if you're having trouble with events, maybe go and check out some events tutorials or do some practice with them. But that is going to be all for this one. Make sure to leave a like if this helped you, and hit the subscribe if you want to see you know, all these videos that I make, and if you want more Unity tips and other sorts of game development stuff. And make sure to actually also check out the website zenfinity.net. I've been posting a lot more there as well. But in the meantime, I will see you next time.